If you find yourself a little bit stuck and staring at a blank page when trying to think of creative ideas for your journal page spreads, or maybe you just don't know where to start with layouts in your journal, today I'm going to share some of my favorite journal pages to hopefully give you some ideas and inspiration for your own layouts. So while every page is different, there are some common threads or quote unquote formulas that I tend to follow. So we'll explore those as we go through each of the different ways that I'm going to show you how you can lay out some of your pages. My first page layout idea for you is to use different sizes and shapes of pages. So as you can see, the first page I've done in this journal, the page was actually like half of a doily that I had bound in as one of my pages, and having it in this way means that there's a really interesting effect here with the shape of the doily, and you could of course do layering behind this, but it just creates a really interesting effect with then how you add things onto the page. And you can do this with lots of different things. So within this journal, you'll see I've used here an envelope that is smaller than the rest of the journal, and that's meant that I've had this sort of interesting page here that I've been able to just tuck a tag into, and you can still see everything behind on other pages, and it just gives a really cool effect with how you can have like smaller pages, for example like this, and where you then add your embellishments to them. And it's something I did quite a lot within this journal in particular. All of the different shapes and sizes gives a really nice layered effect, and you don't have to be precise. I've obviously just like torn a page here. I also did one here with a book page, as you can see, and I actually used these flowers here and overlapped them over the edge, so you have that detail here, so it's not like a straight line on your page, you've got that overlapping detail. And that's just a really fun layout that you can try as well. So even if it's like, you know, a page that's slightly smaller, it just really adds to that layered effect, which I think for junk journals in particular is a really fun way to incorporate different papers, especially if, you know, for example, like you've got here an envelope that is smaller than the rest of your journal, but you still want to include it. You're able to add it then into your journal, and you can see here, here's another example where I've used the same book page that I bound on the first half of the journal, and then I'm then using it as a smaller page on this side, and you can just see how it layers up with all the different collage that I've added there. And I've almost added a bit of a tab here on the side with some like little stitch details and washi tape. So there's lots of different ways you can take this and create different shaped pages. So not only just thinking about how you lay things out, but start with the shape and size of the page itself within your journal. So if all your pages are the same size, just think about like cutting one in half. Maybe you could cut it either that way to make it like a skinnier page, or you could cut it this way and have like ones that fold out in different sections, and just have fun with then the different layouts that you're able to start working with by having the different shaped pages. My next favourite page layout is to include envelopes and have pockets within my journals. So not just thinking about the flat page that we can work on, but how we can add things that allow us to add like tags and different notes and things. And I pulled this journal out because I did it in a few different ways in this journal. So you'll see here I've just tipped in, this is just an envelope, like a brown envelope, and then I've been able to just tuck a few things in, and it gives you extra space for your journaling, especially if you don't want it completely on show. You can do a bit more like hidden journaling by doing it that way. So that's one way that you can add a pocket to your journal. I've also done it as a tip in here, but I've used a like a see-through pocket. So I think this is more of like a glassine type envelope, or this might even be more of a tracing paper because it's not quite as shiny, it's more matte. And then I've been able to use that then to add something into the page. And the thing that I like about this is that when I've added that book page in there, when it's in there, it kind of feels like it's part of the background, but then you pop it out, you have that detail there where you can see through the envelope by not collaging on the whole thing. So there's different ways then that you can lay out the page by working on top of the envelope and then also working with how you add things into it. So playing around with, if you have you know, translucencies with your envelopes as well, you've got different effects that you can play with in that way, so it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is hidden. And another thing you can do is to use the envelope as a design feature. So you can see here, this one has this really cool clasp, and I've used it almost as like a back pocket, because this is the end of my journal, even though it's one of the no-sew like accordion ones, but it's basically kind of the back of this section. And so I've added it here, especially because it's a little bit thicker, and then I've got a really cool envelope there as like my back page, and it's also just, like I said, more of a design feature as well, so it looks really effective if you're able to save things that have like different clasps and things on them, to be able to use them as design elements when it comes to adding envelopes to your junk journals. And then in the same journal, you can see here, this was the other half of that envelope. So I actually had an envelope that was too large, and I decided to cut it in half, and I've tipped this in as a pocket, as you can see here, so I'm able to add things in here. I've just used some sellotape, some clear tape here, so you can't see the join, and then I've just added a little bit of decorative washi tape there, and then I've decorated the front of it here just with a full image, so you can't necessarily tell that it's an envelope page straight away. And then I've used that colour on the back there as a bit of contrast and just done a collage, but then this is its own little mini envelope as well in the centre of the page, so you could obviously add things in the sides and in the tops, but don't forget you could also just tip it in and create a page out of it as well as having the pocket. And I've just left that open, but you could maybe add like a little clasp or something if you wanted it to stay closed. One of my favourite things to use in my journals is collage or different papers, and creating these layouts that have like clustering almost, I find is a really effective way of creating a layout. So you can see here I've focused mostly on the right hand side of the page and also in the sort of bottom right hand side here, and then I've used smaller pieces concentrated in this section here, built it up, and I've left negative space over here. So this is a really fun layout if you wanted to try some collage. Rather than covering the entirety of a spread, think about how you could work maybe, you know, like up one side, or just using a certain section of your page. So what I did is I started with my larger pieces, so like this book page here and also this strip that comes all the way down here, placed my larger pieces onto the page, and then started working with the smaller pieces up until I have my focal point. So this is where thinking about like your background, your middle ground and your foreground comes in, because I would classify background as like this piece, and possibly these over here. And then I've added some pieces as more of a middle ground. So these are smaller pieces like this one, and this one. And then I've gone for the foreground, so my detail and my focal point, so this tag here, and then I've also added like some smaller bits here with washi and stamping, and that's the things that are my foreground elements, so the details, like I said, and the focal point of the tag. And that way then it all kind of works around clustering into this section here when you have all the bits that are overlapping. And that's something I did a lot throughout this journal. As you'll see, this was the Junk Journal January, and you can really see the way I'm like clustering different things when it comes to my layouts, and I think that really helps when it comes to the focal points. So you can see here I've got the stamps, then underneath the text, so these are my like foreground elements, My middle ground would probably be like the stamps, and then the background is the larger book page there, if that makes sense for how the page is built up. So the collage clustering is something, like I said, I do a lot throughout my journals anyway, but in particular in this journal. So you can see here, again, I've got background elements and then foreground elements, and just adding those layers and building up into a focal point. So my focal point was, in this case, floral image here. And so yeah, there's lots of different examples of how I've done that in this journal. Here you've got the text is more of the focal point rather than the image. Here you've got the image as the background really, and then I've built up, and because I've circled here with my pen, you can see that is now the focal point of this page, and that's where your eye is drawn to. So they're just a few examples of collage clustering in my junk journals. Now, when it comes to page layouts, I love to include a floral focal point in my journals, and it's just something that has become a bit of a theme in my journals. But if you are looking for ideas of how to include your florals within your journals, I thought that I would just show you a few examples here. So this one, I've included lots of collage underneath, so building on that collage cluster idea. And then this flower is the only image on this page, so your eye is really drawn to it and it's not distracted by anything else that's on the page. It really becomes the focal point, even though the background is so busy, because you have that contrast in the image versus the background elements. It really does help it pop, and as well because it's pink, and everything else on the page is neutral. So that's something I really like to do, is, as you'll see here, I have the background like completely neutral, and then I would just use the flower, so like cut out from a gardening book or something, as my focal point, and that will be the pop of colour on the page. And I just think it gives a really nice effect. It's an easy way to add a focal point to your page without worrying about everything getting lost, because you have that contrast. So again, here you can see I've got the pink as my pop on the layout, and it doesn't matter where I'm putting it on the page, as long as I've got all those neutral elements, and then my image becomes the focal point by default almost, because it's that pop of colour and it's what your eye is drawn to on the page. And then here is almost a reverse example. So this is a little bit of a busier page, but I've used some coloured elements here in my collage. So there's lots of different tones of pink throughout this, and then I've used a white flower instead. Now, if I'd used a pink flower like the one on the right here, it would have probably all blended in together. So having that white flower as the contrast really helps it to stand out. So you could do a similar concept like this if you had a collage background that had all different colours on it, and then your floral focal point was black and white or just neutral. The contrast would help it to pop. So I think when it comes to adding images and focal points on your page, think about the contrast that there is between the foreground element that you've got, the flower, and then the background, and that's what helps it to pop on the page. If you haven't yet made a no-sew journal, I have to say you're definitely missing out, but this is one of the journals that I really like to use for this next layout idea. So it's less of a all-encompassing like page technique, but the general concept is to have like overlapping elements between your pages, and it just really works well with the accordion journal, because you've just got that one continuous strip. So you'll see here that my page really, for like the first one here, and it does work in isolation on its own like this, and also so does this page. It works as its own in isolation, but when you open this up and hold the two together, you can see here very subtly how I've got some details that are going between the two. So this orange crayon here and the mark making down in the corner here. and the coffee staining that kind of runs throughout as well. And it's a good way of adding cohesion to your pages because the same imagery or colours kind of runs throughout. So you can see here I've worked over the edge of these two pages, and you know, in this way you could take just this page and it would work, or just this page, but you could even just have these two, and because they overlap you can see how it works together, so you don't have like a stark like beginning and end between the pages. Even here you can see how I've got a sticker that is overlapping this bend here, so there's nothing to say that that doesn't work. You know how you'd have in a normal journal page and you'd cut off the excess, but just the way that it carries through into the next page I think is a really interesting layout idea, so that you have both that work on their own, or you can open it up and you just have that journey almost that goes throughout your pages. And this journal from last year I think is just one of my favorite examples of the way that I was carrying different elements sort of throughout the journal. So you can see lots of bits with like collage and washi and all sorts of details that just carry through the pages. It's something that I originally did with this accordion journal when it came to the coffee staining, so you can see how it runs throughout the pages, and I just think it gives a really nice effect for the whole journal, the way that everything blends together. You can see here the way the coffee staining just goes over the edge, and that way then you have, you know, a really cool interesting feature here. Same on the other side, but then when you open it up it works as a page as well. So that's a fun layout idea if you are using a no-sew journal like this one. And staying with the no-sew journal, I just think it's such a fun format, especially when it comes to journal layouts, is to have cutout sections. So in particular with the no-sew, I've done here a cutout of the page. I just cut a complete circle in this, and then I added a image underneath, so you can see it creates, you can't really tell on camera, but in person you can see how there's a bit of dimension there by having that cutout element, and then I just glued the picture underneath. And another interesting thing I did with this journal to create a fun layout was that I actually ripped it in half, so you can see here and here is where the original page was, and then I added in some vellum to create a really fun effect here of like a torn edge, and you can see through, and then you can work with it on the reverse. So I just have a little bit of sort of scrappy collage almost there, and you can see through to the text there. So when you have the journal closed, it's like quite ghosted. And of course you could do this on a regular journal as well. If you just had like this as a page, you could of course just, you know, cut a line like here and here and then extend the page, etc. But I just think it works really nicely in this format because it's also a little bit easier to manage, to just say, okay, I've got this like long strip of a journal and I'm just gonna like chop it in half here and here, and I just find it's then easier to work with because you've just got that one long strip, and it just gives a really cool effect for the page. And you can also see here where I've added the collage like an image, and it's just ever so slightly peeking through there as a little bit of colour and detail on the page. I love to use tags within my journals. They're fun as either pages on their own like tipped in or included into pockets, but I think a really fun way to use them is to have them as like a tag tuck spot. So this is an example here where I've just got a regular tag and I've done some sewn detailing on the right hand side here, and a little bit of washi, which creates like that collage effect, but it's also serving as a way of fixing the tag down on 3 sides. And then the tag itself isn't glued down, so you can see here then I'm able to add something in. So I've just used that as an opportunity then to add some like hidden journaling here, or you could tuck anything underneath it. And I just think that that is a really interesting layout idea, because you could just look at this and think it's like a flat page with the collage and a bit of texture. There's almost a little bit less bulk than if you were to add like stick an envelope in and have it as a pocket. And I think just because it's a tag, it's something different as well in terms of the design and the layout of your page. So if you're looking for a fun idea of a page layout for your junk journal, this might be something that you want to try, especially if you've got like a found tag from, I don't know, like a clothing item you bought or something. You could turn it upside down and start using it as like a collage element. Or maybe if you're just into making loads of tags and you're thinking, I don't know what to do with all these tags that I've got, maybe you could create these tag tuck spots here to be able to include some extra bits within your journals, but then also being able to preserve and document the tag and have it on show, because sometimes I think it's a shame that we make such pretty tags and then they just get put in pockets. And I know you can take the tag out of the pocket, but do you know what I mean? Like when you're just flipping through the journal, you don't necessarily see straight away that the tag is there. So in this way, I'm able to use the tag as a design feature on the page, and then have that extra space, as I said, for some journaling or whatever you want to tuck into that space. I just think it works really nicely as a layout. Now this is one of my favourite journal pages, I think, from all of the journals I've done. This is a good few years old now. It's got all sorts of different bits and pieces in this journal, but I really like this page in particular, and I think just it's the classic idea of using a certain section of your page for your layout. So as I was talking before about the collage clustering, this is sort of taking it a little bit further, and it's more of a one-sided spread. So you can see I've concentrated everything just down one side of my page here, and that way it's really helped me to focus on the different elements that I want and how I'm able to layer it up. So rather than just thinking about the collage clustering, it's also pushing everything onto just one side of the page, and then the other side, apart from this tag, is pretty much completely blank. So don't always feel like you have to work on like both sides of the page. You can just use one side if you want. It could be the right hand side or the left hand side, but adding this tag has just given me the opportunity to pull over this black here and have that contrast. And I think that's another little tip for you, is if you're feeling like you've got a page where you're working on both sides and it's feeling a little bit disjointed, check if you've got like colour that's pulling you from one side to the other. You know, the cream here, I've got it like on this side as well, and it just helps to draw your eye between the two and sort of link them together. So rather than them being like standalone pages, it pulls them together and makes it a lot more cohesive as a journal page layout. So that's something I'm always thinking about in the back of my mind, is how I'm pulling different colours over. So even the, you know, the green that's in this leaf here for the background page, I've got the green over here as well, so it's all complementing each other, as well as thinking about the contrast between you know, everything being over here and there's only one element over here. So there's lots of different ways that you can, you know, not completely bombard a page, but still be able to work on different sections and have that breathing space, but have it be like a little bit more intentional, and actually pull the focus to the piece of the page that you are working on. So that is another idea for a journal page layout, is to just work on the one side of the page, so specifically butting it up against the edge of your page there. So I hope you found those layout ideas useful, and maybe you want to try out a few of those within your own journals. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.